Hey, welcome to the Board Game Rundown. This is Andrew. I'm sure you are excited for the newest World of Everdell board game to hit the market, Farshore. But forget the reviews, forget the unboxings, forget all of the game previews. Let's get into something that's going to help you win some of your first games of Farshore. Today I'm going to give you a top 5 critters and a top 5 constructions to have you looking out for some smart purchases either from the shop or from your hand. So without further ado, let's get into our top 5 critters. Number 5 is the Scribe. Now, the Scribe, as you can see here, it says you may discard 3 cards to both gain 1 shell, which is a point, and draw 1 for each. This is a harvest ability, so you get it immediately, and then you get it at the end of the first round and at the end of the third round. This is a lot of points for a critter, and the fact that you can discard a boatload of cards. If you played in the very first round, you're talking about 3, 6, 9 discards, 9 points. So you are shuffling through your hand. You're getting a lot of variety. I think this is a great card for the cost. Number 5 is the Scribe. Okay, so our number 4, guys, is the Lighthouse Keeper. The Lighthouse Keeper costs 3 mushrooms, and it has the conditional ability that every time you play a card, you may draw a card. Now, there's 3 of these in the deck, so you're probably going to see this every game. This is totally worth it. As you can see from my number 5, cycling through and getting cards is extremely valuable, especially when you have spaces on the board, such as the Lookout, that allow you to draw up to your maximum hand size. You don't want to be spending one of your people each turn, one of your meeples each turn to draw a lot of cards. You want card generating cards, and the Lighthouse Keeper is one of those, and it's probably the most cost effective as well. So that is why Lighthouse Keeper is at number 4. Okay, so for our number 3 is actually one card that I recommend and one card that I suggest you stay away from. So my number 3 is the Cartographer. The Cartographer is a card in which you can play in your city, and only you can access it because this is Farshores. Nobody else can play in your area. And it says, copy any shoreline or face-up location. This is extremely strong, and for a cost of 2 mushrooms, I don't see why you wouldn't play this card. In a worker placement game like Farshore, there are going to be places that are just taken up, and you're going to need a resource, and this is why I think the Cartographer is just a fantastic card. Now, I want to steer you away from one card that looks very similar, but I think you should avoid it at all costs unless you can get one of those bonus tiles, and it is Stowaway. It costs one more mushroom, and it's a one-off ability that says move one of your workers to a new location, even if it's occupied, and activate it. I don't see the value in this card as much as Stowaway. Yes, you're moving one of your workers already that you've placed to another location, but I like the freedom of being able to just choose any location on the board and using that. So that is why the Cartographer is my number 3 choice. Okay, so our number 2 critter. This one's, it seems like underpowered, but just bear with me on this one. Number 2 is the Steward. He's a cool little duck. He only costs 2, and it's one of those your location in your city only cards, which I really like, the red symbol. And it says activate 2 different green spots in your city. Now, in Farshore, there are a lot of strong green spots. I don't have enough time to get into the individuals, but there are a lot of good abilities that you can activate. The Steward is really kind of a situational card. I wouldn't pick him immediately, but if you come across the Steward in the mid-game and you can play him, or her, Steward? Yeah, whatever. If you come across the Steward in the mid-game, I would highly suggest you pick it up if you have a few really dominant green logo cards in your city. The fact that you can activate 2 of them, that is why I recommend Steward for my number 2 ranked critter All right, so our number one critter. This critter needs no introduction if you are a fan to Everdell, because this is my personal favorite card in the original Everdell as well. I do not know how this card crept into Farshore. Maybe it flew down, maybe it flew off the coast to the far shores, but my number one card, and the card you should always, always, always pick, is the throwback. Number one, it is the Postal Pigeon. So I'm going to read you what the Postal Pigeon is. It's only 2. It's not worth any victory points, but that doesn't matter. There are cards in the game that allow you to discard cards from your city. And you know what? Just like in the original Everdell, toss the Postal Pigeon away once you're done using its fantastic ability. Draw 2 cards from the deck. 2 cards for free. Just draw 2 of them, and you may play one of them for free. My goodness, like, this is the best card. I was going through all of the cards when I was playing through this, and first off, I'm so excited that they brought back my favorite card. The Postal Pigeon is so cool. You could just play a card for free. You get to look through the deck. You get to make kind of that scrying choice. A little Magic reference there, but the fact that you can play a card for free, yes, it does have an exception. You can't play any purple cards for free because they're extremely expensive, but the Postal Pigeon is just fantastic. Every time I see Postal Pigeon, and every time you see the Postal Pigeon, you should pick it up and you should play it. That is why the Postal Pigeon is for sure the number one card in Farshore. Now, let's get to the top 5 constructions in Farshore. Okay, so we're in the top 5 constructions. Remember, constructions are buildings that you can play in your city. Now, the city is a little bit different than Everdell in that other people can't interfere in your area. So you can play your meeples in your area. You can't play in other people's, but in Farshore, it's just your little city. Nobody else can mess with you. It's kind of like your island. I guess that's how it thematically makes sense, right? So my number 5 for the constructions is the Abbey. And I'm also going to include one you should just stay away from. It makes no sense. Honestly, I just never play the card. I'm just giving you that little tip right away. The Abbey is a place that you can play in your city, so only you can touch it. And it says, play a card from your hand for 3 fewer resources. This is fantastic. It's got a cheap cost. It's only 2 wood and 1 ruby, I guess we'll call it. And I just want you to avoid the market. Okay, the market is a unique construction. It gives you 1 victory point for some odd reason, and it says when playing a card, you may discard the market from your city and pay 3 fewer resources. I could understand if the market cost 2 resources and it gave you a 3 resource discount in the future, but I just don't understand. You're investing 3 to get 3 back in the future, and then you're discarding the card? Like, I understand discarding the card because it's opening up some space, but it's a victory point. Why would you want to give that up? Especially, when it gets down to it, if you have 14 spaces in your city at the end of the game, you could have used that market to be there. So the market, I really don't see a purpose, especially when you have the Abbey. So I would, if you had to choose between the 2, like I said, unless you're trying to go for a bonus, I highly suggest the Abbey as my number 5 card. Okay, number 4 is a card that's very similar to number 3 coming up soon, but it is the Inn. Let's take a look at the Inn. The Inn is an area that you can play on your island, or your city, sorry. And you can play a card from the bay for 3 fewer resources. Now, this is important because not only can you take from the board, obviously that's part of the game, but you can steal those cards quicker than somebody else who might be saving up resources, right? So you see maybe like a really high cost purple card, and you have the Inn in your city. And this is a relatively cheap card, and it gives you some victory points. I have no problem investing in these red cards that allow you to play your meeples in your city to get you a discount, especially when it's in the bay. Now, we're going to see another card that gives us a discount in our hand in a minute, but I think the Inn is a great number 4 card in our top 5. All right, number 3, guys. From my number 1 from before, you've got to know this is coming. I think Starling Games thought of me when they were thinking of new cards for Farshore, because my number 3, it's not number 1, but my number 3 is the Post Office. So bring back that bird. Let's see it. you know what he's doing. So the post office is a place that you can play in your city. It's a common construction, 2 points, 3 cost. This is just cost effective. Discard any number of cards from your hand and then play a card for that fewer resources. That is fantastic, especially because in Farshore, you're not always going to have cards that you're going to be playing, especially if you play this new location, the Lookout. The Lookout gives you 8 cards, right? Discard any number of cards from your hand and then draw up to your hand limit. That is such a strong location that they've added in Farshore, and this combo is great with it. And that is why my number 3 is the post office. Okay, so our number 2 construction for Farshore is the Scriptorium. So let's take a look at Scriptorium here. Scriptorium is a 2 wood, 1 gem cost. It's a common construction, and it says every time you harvest and when you play the card, you may draw up to 2 cards from the market and up to 2 cards from the deck. This is absolutely insane. If you play this in the very first round of the game, you're drawing 4 cards, and then you end your turn, and then you do 4 more cards, and then at the beginning of autumn, you're doing 4 more cards. There are so many ways that you can dump cards for resources or points in Farshore, and this is just insane. I would even recommend this card near the end of the game as well, because it gives you access to 4 more cards in case you're digging for a card that you need, maybe some really high point card to, steal a win or steal from the board. I highly suggest the Scriptorium. This card is super strong. Sure, it's a little bit expensive, but it's really not. I mean, 3 is not that wild, and it gives you 2 victory points at the end of the game. So that is why it is my number 2. Okay, guys, we've reached the end of this kind of chopped top 10 where we got our top 5 critters and our top 5 constructions. And our number 1, it's actually kind of a throwback to the original Everdell, and it is the Port. Let's take a look at the Port. The Port is a 4-cost card, so it's really expensive. You're going to have to find a way to get this card really early. If you get this card in the mid game or the late game, honestly, I would avoid it. But the power that the Port brings early on is fantastic, okay? Let's read the card. You gain 1 wood, 1 seaweed, or 1 ruby after you play a critter. This is fantastic. It's very thematic, too. I really appreciate that. Getting resources is tough in this game. I mean, you only have a few meeples to play with, right? So a lot of the times your resources are going to be covered up, and you aren't going to be able to start building towards another card that you see in the bay or in your hand. This is where the Port comes in. You can start building up those resources by just dumping some critters. You could even play your Carrier Pigeon and play a couple cards for free, and then you're starting to generate more and more resources every time you start laying critters on the board. And what I really like about Farshore and Everdell games in general is you can toss those critters away, you can get rid of them, and you can start investing towards your high point cards, your purple cards later on in the game. So that is why Port is my number 1, alongside the Coastal Pigeon being the Carrier Pigeon. What is it? The Postal Pigeon. Yeah, it's a pigeon regardless, and thank you for bringing it back. It doesn't matter. That card rocks. So that is my top 10, or my 2 top 5s for Farshore. Once again, my name is Andrew. This is the Board Game Rundown. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think in the comments. What are your top cards? What are your favorite cards in Farshore? So hope you have a great day and enjoy.